I want to thank everybody for joining us today for the Office of Economic Empowerment's second 529-day webinar and conversation about the BabySteps Savings Program. My name is Elena Van Tassel, and I am a Deputy Treasurer as well as the Executive Director of the Office of Economic Empowerment. Before we get started with our conversation, our fantastic panelists, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. And I also want to take a note of today's panel agenda. Many of you are aware about BabySteps, but before I go into BabySteps, I want to highlight Treasurer Goldberg's Office of Economic Empowerment. OEE is the first office of its kind in the country, which focuses on the promotion and advancement of policies that empower all Massachusetts residents. OEE programmatic priorities include closing the race and gender wage gap, racial equity, increasing access to financial education, improving college affordability, and investing in STEM careers and education. This is a Zoom webinar and will be recorded. The recording may be uploaded onto a public website for future use. This webinar will also be streamed live on Facebook. Any information shared through question functions will be anonymous. Please note, however, that the chat record is subject to public record laws and as such will not be anonymous. And just a friendly reminder that this is a webinar and not a meeting. So you'll not be able to view the other participants, but you're encouraged to use the chat feature, which is right down at the bottom, to communicate with the host and the other panelists. The question and answer period will be available throughout the entire panel, and we will make sure to answer all of your questions. And you can start putting questions in whenever you like. Now, please join me in welcoming the Executive Director of MEFA, Tom Graff.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Elena, and the Treasurer's Office for their partnership and working with us over the past years on BabySteps. So thank you. It's an exciting day. It's a time of year where we can highlight saving for college. We do it all year round, but it's nice to be highlighted. 529 Day is no surprise, May 25th, 529 Day. And we use this as a great opportunity to recognize the importance of saving for college and sharing various guidance and resources to help families move forward. 2021 marks the 21st anniversary of the creation of the 529 plans, which were passed by Congress 25 years ago. And MEFA is fortunate to have started its program shortly thereafter, the U-Fund College Investing Plan, which we offer in conjunction with Fidelity Investments, as a vehicle to encourage people to save and grow those savings over time. And those savings and those investments can be used, if they're used as qualified education expenses, they can be withdrawn tax-free. There's also a number of other incentives in Massachusetts. A number of years ago, the state approved a tax deduction, $1,000 for singles or $2,000 for married, in an attempt to get people interested in the program. And just last year, in conjunction with the Treasurer's Office, we started offering the BabySteps program that provides a $50 incentive for Massachusetts residents whose child was born in 2020 and continues into 2021. The one thing we always emphasize, and you'll hear it later from Jonathan and Julie when we get into the questions, to MEFA employees who spend an enormous amount of time on an annual basis talking about savings for college and its importance, is encouraging families to create a plan. And we often hear from families that starting's the hardest step, and once they get started, it kind of falls into place. Understanding no matter how much you start saving, there's always the opportunity to continue to add, and it's just really that inertia, getting started, which is maybe the most difficult step in involving the whole family in saving for college, whether it's birthdays or holidays or things like that. Gifting is what we found is a very powerful way of advancing and growing your savings. We've been very fortunate over the almost 25 years that as of April 30th of this year, over 225,000 Massachusetts residents are saving in the U plan, the U fund, over $8 billion. We crossed the $8 billion threshold for the first time this year. It's a popular and well-respected program, and obviously the assistance of Fidelity from an investment standpoint is critical to making this work. The great part about that is it does work. And over those 25 years, over $5 billion have been withdrawn to pay for college, really doing what it was originally intended for. I always like to use an example that if, and you think a little further down the road, but if we were faced with a $10,000 bill, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Yeah, you can start saving. We usually use an example of $7,000, and with investment over a certain amount of time, that could grow to, more than $10,000. Or if you hadn't saved, you would have to borrow that money, $10,000, to make a payment to a school. And over time, your payments would be around $14,000, again, depending on the rate. So you have a choice of saving something smaller or paying for a larger number over time. We have found that Massachusetts residents are very receptive to saving for college. Over 49% of Massachusetts parents have said they've opened a college savings account or are saving for college. Despite what has happened over the last year, the pandemic, we've seen record amounts of folks establishing accounts, continuing to contribute. We just went through the first quarter of the year, and it's the highest number of accounts that have ever been opened in our 25 years. So people recognize the power of savings, the advantage of it moving forward. And as I suggested, this isn't something that has to be done alone by the parents, involving the whole family. MEFA has, and Fidelity has, a pretty easy way of gifting and putting additional funds, whether grandparents or aunts or uncles, or even something as simple as birthday gifts. So would encourage people to go on to MEFA or Fidelity and look at it. Saving for college is really, if you believe in further education, is really a great opportunity. We'll be here today, as I say, Jonathan and Julie, to answer questions. And they're folks who are experts on this and can probably handle just about any questions you might have. So thanks everyone for participating today. We look forward to the conversation, and thank Elena and the treasurer and all her staff for all the work that they do to help us promote saving for college. Thanks, Elena.
Thank you, Tom. And I just want to thank Tom and the entire team at MEFA for just being a tremendous partner with the Treasurer's Office, with the BabySteps Savings Plan. Since day one, MEFA has just really worked hand in hand with the Treasurer's Office to help spread the word about the program. We now have a welcome video from Massachusetts State Treasurer Deborah Goldberg to help kick off our conversation.
Hi there, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today as we celebrate 529 Day and reflect on the value of saving for the future. I wish I could be there with you live on Zoom, but I know the teams at the Office of Economic Empowerment and MEFA have prepared a wonderful presentation. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to recognize Tom Graff, the Executive Director of MEFA. Tom, thank you for your tremendous partnership and the leadership you show on behalf of the families of Massachusetts. And I also want to thank my team. We created the Office of Economic Empowerment when I first was sworn in as treasurer in 2015. The focus is to provide programs, policies, and initiatives to help people make informed, personal financial decisions throughout the entirety of their lives. And my office is committed to doing its part to close the racial and gender wage gap, to increase access to financial education, and improve post-secondary affordability, post-secondary education affordability. So today we're here to tell you about BabySteps. BabySteps Savings Plan and the benefits of opening a U Fund 529 account. BabySteps which is my dream, helps babies and families start to plan for the future early on by giving each child born or adopted in Massachusetts $50 to open a U-Fund seeded account through MEFA. When families fill out the birth certificate form, we ask that you check off the box and give us your contact information and permission to send you information about baby steps. Then our relationship begins. After creating an account, families are invited to participate in events and use our free digital learning labs. We launched this at the beginning of 2020, and like you, we had no idea what was in store for us in the months ahead. But very quickly, we found ways to adapt to the changes brought about by the pandemic, and we made all of our events virtual, increasing our digital communication efforts. Despite the challenges we all faced, believe it or not, families just kept on opening up BabySteps accounts at record rates. So whether you are an expectant parent who recently learned about baby steps, or a nonprofit leader wanting to teach your community about this initiative, we are really glad you're here today. And we encourage you to ask questions and share what you learn with your family, your friends, your neighbors, and your community. So thank you so much for joining us here today, and I hope that you get a lot out of the presentations. Bye.
Thank you to Treasurer Goldberg. We are now going to move on to the conversation about 529s and the Baby Steps Savings Plan. We have two fantastic experts on college savings from MEFA. And as Tom said, please ask them as many questions as you have about college savings. You can utilize the chat function or the Q&A box. Julie and Jonathan are both fantastic and very knowledgeable and are here to answer your questions. So Julie, I'm gonna start with you today. Why don't you start with what is a 529 plan? How does it work?
Sure, thanks. So a 529 plan is an account, a college savings account that a family can open at any time, preferably as early as possible, and begin to save in a tax advantaged way. So in other words, they begin to save and they don't pay any taxes on the earnings all the way through. And then when it comes time to use those savings for qualified education expenses, and we'll get to that, but there's a wide range of those. And as long as they use the money from the account to cover qualified education expenses, then they never pay any taxes, federal or state, on those earnings. So, and families can save once in a while, or they can save all the time in this account. You know, they can, in other words, regularly, they can set it up to have regular savings.
Thank you, Julie. Let's see, before we continue with the question and answer portion, let's see who is in the audience today. We're able to launch the poll. All right, so there is a poll in front of you. Can you respond with who is here today? And we did get some questions already in the Q&A box, and I just want to answer one question that this session is being recorded, and we will be posting it on our YouTube channels and other websites. So please check out the Office of Economic Empowerment social media and like our Facebook page, and we'll have it posted. All right, I think most people have voted. Can we see the responses? So we have some families, some parents of new children here. Other attendees are interested in baby steps and 529. Some people already have a 529 account, which is great. And some people never heard of baby steps or 529. So hopefully everybody here can learn something new and get their questions answered today about both baby steps and 529 accounts. Jonathan, Can you just walk us through some of the basic information about the 529 account?
Sure. So about the actual the U Fund 529 account,
Yes.
so this is MEFA's 529, the Massachusetts 529 program. And we've contracted with Fidelity Investments, and Fidelity Investments handles the investments of the accounts and the servicing of the accounts as well. So if you open up a U Fund account, your money is going to be invested by Fidelity. And if you have questions about your account and how it's doing, or you need to make changes on that, you would be put in touch with Fidelity Investments. Now, as Julie said, you can open an account with no money down, actually, or you can just open an account, and through baby steps, you'd of course be eligible for the $50 seed, so you don't have to contribute right away, but you can if you like, and you can choose to either contribute every so often or have something automatically withdrawn from your bank account. There are many investment options available, and you can contact Fidelity for guidance on those as well. But you would set up an owner, so the person, typically a parent, but not always, who is in charge of the account, and they can direct the money, so they can withdraw funds or have the funds sent to a college, and a beneficiary who is the student. And so, throughout time, money is put away for that student. It is growing in the market, tax deferred, waiting to be used. And there are certain circumstances by which you could change that beneficiary, but that is generally the structure. Does that answer the question?
Yes, and then somebody did ask, is this only for Massachusetts residents? Maybe you could answer for both the 529s and baby steps.
Sure, yeah. So the Baby Steps program is for Massachusetts, for children born or adopted in Massachusetts, and they have 1 year to claim, open up a U Fund, and claim that $50 seed money for that child who is either born or adopted in Massachusetts. So that $50 seed deposit is contingent upon the baby being born in or adopted in Massachusetts. But 529 plans, the U Fund, you don't have to be a Massachusetts resident to invest. So anyone can open a 529 plan, or specifically even a U Fund. They don't have to be from Massachusetts to do that.
Thanks, Jonathan. Julie, once the account is open, what is the best ways for families to contribute to the account? Can anybody else besides a parent contribute and open the accounts?
So yes. So, one thing we've found, I think Tom mentioned this, sometimes one of the first hurdles is just opening the account. That's the first big, good step. And then the second step that really contributes to more savings is to set up something that Jonathan mentioned of regular savings, if it's at all possible to have, a small amount of money come out of your bank account every month. So it's a little bit like set it and forget it. And maybe that amount goes up or down depending on what else is going on in your financial situation at different times. Perhaps during the pandemic, maybe people felt that they still wanted to save, but they wanted to save a lower amount. You can always change that. But just the idea of having an amount that comes right out and gets saved without having to think about it generally contributes to people being able to save more. So that's a good idea if you can do that. If not, then you certainly have the ability to just save once in a while. And it might sometimes be good to save once in a while. If, let's say, a child has a birthday and people all give gifts and give money, that might be a good time to put in a higher amount. Or let's say you get your tax refund back or something like that, might be a good time to just, put a specific amount in at a certain time. And then to the question of other people contributing directly to the account, that is possible and can be done pretty easily. All someone needs to do is really write a check and have the child's account number and can put money into the account. And that's clearly a good idea, right? Is to get your friends and family to save. I always say that when it's holiday time or birthday time and grandparents, aunts, uncles are looking for ideas of, what gift to give to your child. It's nice to help them and let them know that a small contribution into the 529 plan would be great. And maybe a grandparent can then do that. And maybe they want to give a book or some other little tangible item as well. But really putting some money in is terrific. And lastly, for the U Fund and Fidelity, they allow you to set up a gifting page where you can put a picture of your child and, you know, so a little bit of information, and then you'll create a link and you can send that link to friends and families to say, this is a nice, easy way if you want to, you know, help out little Johnny or whatever.
Thanks, Julie. And Julie, another question that we often get, and somebody just asked this, are there any fees?
Oh, so great question. So the nice thing is there are no account maintenance fees. You don't pay a fee when you open the account. So there are really no overarching fees. The only fees would be any fees that are tied to the underlying mutual funds in the portfolio. And if you go to the Fidelity/U Fund webpage, you can see a listing of what all of those are and all of that, but only those. They don't appear like fees. They're just woven into the mutual fund portfolios.
Thank you, Julie. Jonathan, we often get questions about the tax benefits. It's been already alluded to. Can you walk us through the tax benefits of the accounts? And then we did have an attendee ask, if that person's a Massachusetts resident, do I have to contribute to a MEFA account to claim the Massachusetts state tax benefits?
Okay, yeah. So just to go through the tax benefits first, there are sort of two levels of tax benefits. The first being the sort of standard 529 tax incentives that occur, which are your investments grow in the market without taxes. So they're tax deferred while they're growing. And then that continues on when you withdraw the funds or use them for, again, a qualified educational expense, which are tuition, fees, room and board, books, supplies, equipment. These are things that higher education qualified expenses. You pay no taxes on those earnings as long as you're spending on qualified educational expenses. So that's one level. The second level is in Massachusetts. There is a state income tax deduction that you can claim for your contributions to the Massachusetts U Fund, and that is $1,000 you can claim if you're an individual filer, or $2,000 if you're a married filer filing jointly. So those limits are per filer and not per account. So if you have 3 different accounts and you're putting in 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, your limit is still 2,000, but it's a great incentive to get people to save and to open accounts. As far as the question is concerned, I think it was, do you have to be contributing to, if you're a Massachusetts resident, do you have to be contributing to the Massachusetts plan in order to deduct the, claim the income tax deduction? And the answer is yes, you would have to be contributing to the Massachusetts U Fund, or actually the U Plan, which is another program. But those programs are the ones that you can claim the Massachusetts state income tax deduction for.
Thank you, Jonathan. Julie, some people have questions about what qualified educational expenses are, and are those tax-free?
Yeah, so qualified education expenses are broad, which is nice. They are things like tuition, fees, room and board, books, supplies, required equipment. So a wide range of qualified education expenses. And in fact, there is now even more flexibility for qualified expenses. And so more recently, families can actually use some 529 savings toward K through 12 expenses, $10,000 per year. And even more recently than that, can actually use the money for $10,000 one-time repayment of student loans, or some apprenticeships. So a pretty broad and flexible listing of qualified education expenses.
Thank you, Julie. Jonathan, we've gotten a couple questions in the chat, or the Q&A box, that is, about investments. One user asked if they have control over the 529s and how to invest the funds listed on Fidelity. A similar question was also asked, do you choose the mutual funds? And is there an average rate of return for 529s?
So yeah, this is a good time to point out Fidelity once again, because we're always very careful to say we are not investment experts at MEFA, and we don't give out investment advice. We're not qualified to do that, nor do I, have any particular desire to give anybody any investment advice. But so yes, it is an investment vehicle. So you do choose investments in a sense. And now you can do that in a couple of different ways. And you can contact Fidelity and you can talk to them about, your feelings about investments, and they can sort of counsel you and sort of give advice on which types of strategies you can use. And so there are age-based portfolios where they will base the investments on the age of the child, so that might start off a little bit more aggressive, and then as the child gets older and closer to the age of college, they would maybe shift those investments over to more conservative options, so that you're more likely to safeguard those gains that you made. You can choose that option. You can choose to invest in particular options that are available. It's all based on your preference, and I would encourage them to work through Fidelity in determining that.
Thank you, Jonathan. We've had a couple questions, Julie, and we get this question a lot. What happens if my child doesn't go to college? You start the 529 account, you start the BabySteps Savings Plan, my child chooses not to go to college, or maybe receives a scholarship that covers the cost, or maybe there's funds left over at the end of college. What then happens to the funds in the 529?
Oh, yes. So a number of things, actually. There are a number of choices that a family has. And one, I mentioned even that the funds can be used for K through 12 expenses. So somehow if a family knew that college wasn't in the picture, but also some apprenticeship programs. So it's very much post-secondary education. And I think we heard the treasurer emphasize that. So there are a wide range of programs and paths that a student can take that may still allow the 529 plans to be used. So that's first. But let's say a student really, isn't going to use those. Then a few choices the family has is they can transfer the funds to another beneficiary, a sibling, or even a cousin, or even the parent themselves. So anyone who's a relative of the initial beneficiary, that's another choice. Or they can just decide to take out the funds. And if they're used for non-qualified expenses, then what happens is they will have to pay regular income taxes on any earnings. So any interest that accrued on the savings would then be subject to regular income tax and a 10% penalty tax just on the earnings. But again, important for families to know that no matter what, they can take the money out and it is theirs. But if it's not used for qualified expenses, then they will have those two, the tax and the penalty. One other piece, though, is that if a family is afraid of saving too much, this can also be used for graduate school. So it's not just undergrad, it's graduate school. So there are a wide range of uses. And yet if none of that works out, the family can still take the money and just take those tax penalties on the earnings.
Sorry, I had to get off. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, I didn't mention, you mentioned the scholarship. So that's one other important piece. So if a student receives a scholarship, and therefore the 529 monies aren't needed, then actually they would still pay income tax on the earnings, but they would not have that 10% penalty. So that's key.
Thank you, Julie. Jonathan, let's get into a little bit more details about the Baby Steps Savings Plan a little bit. Who's eligible for Baby Steps? When can somebody sign up for the Baby Steps account?
Sure. So baby steps is it, well, as you make the distinction clear, anyone can sign up for a youth fund or 529 plan. Baby steps is slated specifically for all babies born in Massachusetts or children adopted in Massachusetts. And they have a year to open up that youth fund account and to claim that. So that is who is eligible for that $50 seed money into baby steps. So when they can do that, as the treasurer alluded to in her remarks, we worked with the hospitals, birthing hospitals in Massachusetts, and they can check the box when their moms are filling out their forms for birth certificate information and Social Security, and they'll be contacted after the fact saying, you were interested in this program, but really they don't have to check the box. If somebody is eligible for this account, what they would need to do is to go to fidelity.com or go to mefa.org and click through and open up a youth fund account. And so as long as the student is eligible, that is the student was born in Massachusetts under a year ago or adopted in Massachusetts under a year ago, just by going through that youth fund online application, the system is going to recognize that they're eligible for the Baby Steps seed money. So what happens at that point after they're finished with that youth fund application is that will be put into the pipeline, and about 60 days or so later, they should see that $50 seed money come through. So it doesn't, now it's typically parents that open that up. It doesn't have to be, can be grandparents, can be other folks. But as long as that child is eligible and an account is opened and it's within that 1 year, they'll receive the seed money.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just, you did mention eligibility. Somebody did ask whether or not active duty military returning to Massachusetts are eligible.
As long as the student is born in Massachusetts within that year, that person can open up the account and be eligible.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jonathan. And I'm also going to mention, we do have a veterans bonus program in the Massachusetts State Treasurer's Office. I'm going to ask that the link be put into the chat function just to make sure any members of the military who may be watching are aware of that program too. So just wanted to add that in. One other question, maybe Julie, you can answer this. This is a question we get all the time. When do you get the $50?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, that was for you, Julie.
Great. When do you get the $50? Yes, that's the question. How quickly do you get the $50? Yeah. Yes. So once you open the account, it's pretty quick. But we like to say you definitely want to wait about a month, and you might even want to give it a little more than that. But after that point, the $50 should automatically be in your youth fund account.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And then this is another question we get, and somebody did ask this. What about siblings? Maybe the child was the older siblings who may have been born before January 1, 2020. Julie, maybe you could answer this too. Are they, they're not eligible for baby steps. What can we do for those children?
Yes. So you're right. This is another common question. So yes, for baby steps, there's that 1 year limit, born or adopted in Massachusetts, 1 year limit to get the $50 into baby steps. But it would be a really great idea when a parent is going in to open the account for the baby to also open an account for the other siblings. Now, they won't get that $50 incentive, but it's a great idea for each of your children to have one of these accounts. And as you know, we just keep talking about having it started when they're young, will just give you a chance to have all kinds of ways to save toward post-secondary expenses.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Jonathan, we've gotten a couple of questions that are along the same lines. For the 529 accounts, does it need to be tied to one person? Can it be used for siblings or multiple family members?
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. So when you're setting an account up, there needs to be one owner of an account and one beneficiary of an account. So in that sense, it is tied to one person. You can also add a successor account, a successor owner rather, and that sometimes, people want to do that in case something were to happen to the owner, that account could be transferred over to that successor owner. Now, having said that, you can't transfer the beneficiaries from one child to the next. And Julie already alluded to that. If you have money left over, maybe a younger sibling can use that money, you can transfer it over. So you are able to do it that way, but the accounts do need to be set up sort of with one owner and one beneficiary. And, if you're going to have more than one child in college at once, it might not be ideal to keep switching beneficiaries over and over again to use the same amount of the same account. So it is set up that way. You can't transfer over, but it would depend upon the circumstances if that's going to be the best, I think, way to go.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Sure.
Julie, again, this is another question we get all the time. We've gotten a couple people have asked this today. What about financial aid? Does opening a 529 account impact a child's chances of getting financial aid or another, maybe even a scholarship?
Oh, that's great. Yes. And people worry about this a lot. And so we love to answer this question and break down any fears or myths that are out there. So when you apply for financial aid, your whole financial picture is looked at, but the financial aid process is very much income driven. So really the biggest factor in your eligibility for financial aid is parent and student income. Now, assets are counted, and money in a 529 plan is counted as a parent asset on the FAFSA and when you're applying for financial aid. So that means that it's counted in a much smaller way. And the figure I like to throw out there is that any parent assets, including a 529 plan, is counted at about at a maximum of 5.6% of the amount of the asset to be used toward financial aid. So if I can say it in maybe an easier way, let's say that you have $10,000 in a 529 plan. That is going to affect your financial aid at the most, and I really mean at the most, by about $560, because that's 5.6% of 10,000. So it's always better to be saving and have that little bit counted in, but there's really a minimal effect on financial aid from 529 savings.
Thank you, Julie. I know there's still more questions coming in, and we are going to get to all of them. We are going to do another poll question. Can we launch that next poll? All right, this one is about compound interest, now that it's on the screen. So here's the question. I guess it's a bit of a word problem ahead of you. Will Julie or Jonathan have more money when saved when each of their children turns 18? Okay, now you can read it. Julie saves $50 per month in a 529 account. Jonathan saves $100 per month, but starts later in second grade. So firstborn and versus second grade. Questions in front of you? We'll give it a few minutes or a few moments, I should say. Who will have more money saved when the child turns 18, Julie or Jonathan? All right, can we see the results of the poll question? So most people think that Julie is going to have more saved, and that is correct. Julie, can you explain why this is the correct answer?
Yes, so this is a very smart group who really understands that that time is such an important factor in being able to save more money. So if you see the details that I like that we're Julie and Jonathan, that I contributed $10,800 and earned $10,736 in interest in saving for a child from birth. Whereas Jonathan actually was saving more money per month, $100 per month, but waited till the child was in second grade and then had to contribute $13,200 and earn interest of $6,500. So Jonathan actually ended up putting in more money and earning less interest, just given the time frame there. So the key here is compound interest, that the earlier you start, the more chance you have to earn interest and then earn interest on the interest. And so you're letting that work for you. And so it's just such a good reason why this Baby Steps program, starting right when the baby is born, is the ideal. But again, even if you don't save when your baby is a baby, the earlier you start, the better, and the more you're going to be able to take advantage of that time.
Thanks, Julie. I'm just going to mention that we have the BabySteps Savings Plan.org website, and on the website is actually a calculator, and you can put in a child's age and then see how much you can save over time. It is a great tool, so feel free to open up a second screen while we're chatting and check that out. I'm going to go back to some of the questions that we've received from attendees today. Jonathan, one person did ask, do both parents have access to the money and can withdraw the money?
Oh, that's a good question. Only the owner of the account has access to the funds. So I'm not 100% sure. There may be some access for a trusted person on the account, although that's something to ask Fidelity, but only the owner has control over the account. That's a good question. So that's really the first decision that you have to make when you're opening the account, is who do you want to be the owner and who do you want to have control finally over the account. And so you do want to be deliberate when you make that choice, for sure.
Thanks, Julie. So, all right, thanks, Jonathan. Now, next, Julie, I apologize. So, Julie, we've gotten a couple questions along the same lines. Can 529 accounts only be used for certain colleges? Can these funds also be used abroad?
Oh, yes. So there is a very wide range of colleges where these funds can be used. So sometimes we just like to say any accredited college or university in the United States and some institutions abroad. So it's institutions that have a federal code, and there are places you can find that online, and maybe we can put that in the chat as well. I think it's Jonathan might be able to help me. College savings.
Oh yeah.
Saving for college.
Yes.
Or if you Google federal colleges with federal school codes.
We're going to send out a post email with links, so we'll make sure to add that in, Julie.
That's great. So yes, so many colleges and universities, and also some are international where these funds can be used.
And Julie, along the same lines, somebody asked about whether or not if a child goes to UMass, there's special benefits, and can you lock in tuition rates ahead of time? What is this person referring to?
Yes. So with the U Fund, no, that all colleges are treated the same. But I think this person, you must be referring to the U Plan, which is MEFA's other college savings program. And with the U Plan, families are able to lock in a percentage of tuition at a fairly large group of participating colleges and universities here in Massachusetts. And if you go to mefa.org/uplan, you can learn all about that program, which is another terrific way to save for college.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Jonathan, what happens to the account if there's a change in the child's name?
If there's a change in the child's name?
Yes.
Oh, the child can have their name change reflected on the account. The identifying features are name, social security number, date of birth for the beneficiary. So if there's a name change, that's fine. They just contact Fidelity and with the proper paperwork, and they can make that change. Shouldn't be an issue.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Julie, I have another question here from an attendee. So I'm going to read it directly. I'm familiar with 529 plans and have opened accounts for all three of my children since they were young. That's great news. However, I was recently told that a 529 has a downside, primarily during the time of college financial aid applications. And we did talk about that a little bit. I was told an alternative, which is also tax-free, is to put money in certain life insurance policies. What is your opinion on this? I'm still contributing to our 529 plans and the money pool is growing nicely, but I want to make sure I'm educated on the counter arguments I've been hearing about these days.
Yeah, that's, it's in a way that's a little bit of a longer conversation because people have choices to plan. But what I will say about 529 plans is that they are, very specifically designed to pay for college expenses. So they really work for that. And that myth or misconception that they hurt you in the financial aid process, it is real because they really allow you to be able to pay for college and help you so much more than they will adjust your financial aid. So, it's a bit of a myth to think that your 529 plans are going to hurt you when it comes to applying for financial aid. So as for the other choices, I would say you should look into all of your options and there, different people choose to do things differently. But the fact that these 529 plans have been designed and tweaked and improved over time to really help people with college expenses, I think makes them really the vehicle of choice.
Thanks, Julie. Jonathan, this person has a follow-up question to something you said a little bit earlier. Jonathan had said earlier that there could be a successor owner on the account, but also there can only be one owner. Am I understanding correctly that there can only be one owner, but the successor owner gets control if something happens to the primary owner?
That is correct. Yes. So there is only one owner at a time, and that person is in control of the account. The successor owner is in case, God forbid, something were to happen to the owner, that person could slide in and assume control of the account. Some people, now you can designate a successor owner when you're setting up the account. You don't have to do that. You can skip that part of the application and always add one later on. The other thing I'd like to say about that is some people assume that since the child is referred to as the beneficiary, that if something were to happen to the owner, then the child then would just become the owner of the account, which is not the case. The owner needs to be at least 18 years old to assume ownership of that account. So it just makes it a lot easier if, in case, God forbid, something were to happen, that somebody else could take over ownership of that account.
Thanks, Jonathan. Julie, I think that you spoke earlier about financial aid. Somebody had a follow-up question. I understand the weight on the parent is assessed at 5.69%. What is the weight on income?
Yeah, so the weight on income is a little bit more complicated because it's not just income, it's the size of the family, it's how many students in the family are in college. So there are just a number of other factors that factor into that. There are families with very low income, may be assessed zero right away off just by virtue of a lower income status. So I think the best advice I give to families is to use something called an expected family contribution calculator. So that's called an EFC calculator. And you can find those generally, and we have one on the MEFA website. And if a family uses that and plays around with it and plays around with different incomes and different assets, and they can see how that changes and what they will be expected to pay for college, given their own financial situation. I think that's the best way to see how higher income, lower income will change what they're expected to pay for college.
Thanks, Julie. Jonathan, we got another question about 529s and taxes. How does the money contributed for the 529 show on a tax return?
How does the money that you contribute show on the tax return?
Yeah.
So you would just contact whoever your tax provider is, your tax preparer is, tell them this is the amount that you had contributed for the year, and that's, they would take that into account. The tax ramifications on distributions come in at the end. So if you withdraw funds from the, and I just want to make sure this is mentioned, if you withdraw funds from the 529 and use them, they're not assessed at that time. But if you are contacted by the IRS, you need to show what you have used the funds for, and that needs to be, you need to be able to show that you use it for a qualified expense. But for contributions to the tax for your state income taxes, I don't believe there is tax paperwork that's generated on that. So you would just get in touch with your tax preparer and let them know the amount.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Sure.
And Julie, we did get another question. And what is the percentage of children who have a 529 account that are able to graduate debt-free from college? I'm not sure if you have numbers on that.
I don't have numbers on that. So I'm trying to think if I have any point of wisdom or fact that I can share. I don't know, Elena, if we want to mention just one of the tenets of the whole Baby Steps program in general, right? That we have found that there's all of this research that shows that students who know that they have a college savings account that's for them end up going to college in higher numbers and graduating from college in higher numbers, just by virtue of knowing that there's a college savings account set up in their name. And it doesn't really matter how much money is in it, but it seems to have a positive effect in how they carry themselves through school and aspirations and all of that. So generally, we know through research that it's a positive for students to know that they have a college savings account.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, Julie. You know, when we're talking to families and our community partners, you know, we understand, you know, $50 is, you know, it's only a small amount compared to the cost of college, but we're not just growing savings, we're growing, you know, really a college-bound identity. And that's what we really like to explain to families, that, you know, children with a college savings account are not just more likely to go to college, but graduate as well too. Before we finish for the day, because I know it's almost 1:30, and I want to make sure, I think we did answer all the questions that have come in so far. If there's any more, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. One question that we get all the time, and I just want to, is where does this $50, that the $50 seed deposit for the Baby Steps Savings Plan come from? And I just wanted to answer that. For Baby Steps, we have for the babies that were born in 2020, the $50 was paid for through the Economic Empowerment Trust Fund. The Hildreth Stewart Family Foundation was our founding donor. We have a number of other additional foundations that have also contributed to help fund the Baby Steps Savings Plan, including Harbor One, People's United Bank Foundation, Santander as well too, and the Greater Worcester Community Foundation. the Alden Stewart Family Foundation as well too. MEFA is now doing the deposits for some of the babies that were born in 2020, but all of the babies that were born in 2021 and 2022. So I just wanted to clarify where that funding was coming from. I think I'm just sorry, I just saw something pop up in the Q&A. I want to make sure, oh, it was nice. One more question, maybe Julie or Jonathan can answer this. From your wisdom, experience, if our household makes $50,000 a year, what is the recommended monthly contribution to make toward our 529?
So I will just say, whatever you can put in is great. And I will point you towards a specific tool that you can use on the MEFA website, which is our college planning tool. Oftentimes this comes up where families, particularly of young children, new babies, they want to pay for college and they want to know what's a good amount to put in every month. And it's a very difficult question to answer because there's so many things we don't know yet. We don't know where the child's going to go to school. We don't know how much financial aid they're going to receive, et cetera. We have a tool that allows you to estimate some of those things. So you can create a profile and put in the age of the student. And so, they'll estimate what college may be by the time you get there. And if you're putting in this amount, this is how much you might have. And this is how much, if you're earning, you might be eligible for financial aid. So you can do that. And that's on mefa.org. And you go to start saving, or rather start planning, and look for our college planning tool. So you could use that. But really saving anything at all, starting to save anything at all is really the biggest thing. And I tell this story all the time. I've told it a lot this week already, but I'll tell it again. To your point earlier about even saving a little bit in the compound interest, I was saving very, very little bit for the first 9 months of my child's life, and I had no idea I was saving it because my wife had set up the automatic withdrawal on the U Fund account. I said to her when my son was 9 months old, we have to start saving, we have to start putting money in my son's account. And he said, yeah, we've been doing that for 10 months. I had no idea. It was a really small amount and it was just coming out. But that turned into a surprising amount over the years. So even if you think it's not very much, it's going to go a lot longer. It's going to go a lot further than you think. That's my thought. Julie, do you have a thought?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is the case. And I just happened to be seeing in the chat, someone said, is 11 years old too late to start? And the answer is absolutely not. And so kind of the other side of Jonathan's thoughts about having a young child, I have a college student and one who graduated from college. And when I would be out doing financial aid presentations and looking at financial aid offers from colleges who are going to other parents, I would panic year after year. And so later in life of my kids, I started to put even more into those accounts, even when they were in high school. And that served me well too. So it's never too early, never too late. And, any amount is good.
Great. I think we have one other question, and then I think this will be our last question for today. Are there any administrative fees associated with the 529 accounts?
No.
So, all right. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank Tom Graff again for his continued partnership with this program, and everybody at MEFA for their work on this program. I especially want to thank Julie and Jonathan for answering all these questions. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We know that this this is just 1 hour of one day, but this is a continuing conversation. And as Tom said at the beginning of this, we like to talk about 529 accounts every day, and we're really here to answer your questions. There will be an email that goes out to all attendees afterwards with contact information. We'll also put our email into the chat function as well too. But please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And there'll also be a quick short survey at the end of this Zoom about today's session. We're always trying to make sure that we're offering programs that meet the needs of our attendees. So please help us by answering some quick short poll questions. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you have a fantastic Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.